Meghan Markle and fresh bullying allegations about the fake Duchess making their way into the public domain via Sarah Vine, star columnist of the Daily Mail, who has published this front cover article in You magazine, marking 10 years of Meghan Markle, a decade of drama, she says. And what is interesting about this is these anecdotes are maybe not the worst that you have heard, but they very much paint a picture of Meghan Markle being a bad guy before she entered the British royal family, and then even worse once she was inside the British royal family. And I remind everyone, I was the first to reveal that there was any consternation behind the scenes about Meghan Markle's behaviour, and the consternation was originally coming from Catherine, the Princess of Wales, and the late Queen Elizabeth II. And when you see the propagandists on woke ITV like Charlene White try and say, oh, well, they're all bullies, find me the evidence that the late Queen or Catherine, the Princess of Wales, ever treated any members of royal staff like this. So we're going to get into these key revelations from Sarah Vine, then get analysis with Brittany, editor of the Royal News Network. So Vine writes, when Soho House in Istanbul opened its doors in April 2015, an old friend of mine was thrilled to be invited to the celebrations. It was a glamorous weekend-long affair attended by celebrities such as Eddie Redmayne, Jamie Dornan, Sophie Ellis-Bextor, Claudia Winkleman, Paloma Faith, and more. There were lavish lunches and boat trips, and many of the invitees stayed in the new hotel, a beautifully restored palazzo. My friend recalls that at one point he was in the lobby when a very pretty American woman strode up to the front desk. She proceeded to berate the staff about some kind of problem in her room. My friend couldn't quite catch the details, but the general gist seemed to be that she was unhappy with the quality of her goodie bag, which she felt was insufficiently lavish in its largesse. My friend remembers thinking, wow, it takes quite some chutzpah to complain about a free gift at a free weekend in a 5-star hotel full of A-listers. At the time, he had no idea who the angry American was, nor, he recalls, did anyone else in his group. A year later, he saw a photograph of Prince Harry's new girlfriend, Meghan Markle, and recognised her immediately. The woman from Soho House, Istanbul. And Vine goes on to analyse, I've never forgotten that anecdote, because it always seems to me that given the way things turned out, it was pretty telling. In fact, in many ways, it reflects Meghan's attitude to the royal family as a whole. She was treated with generosity and kindness, offered all the trappings and the status, but somehow none of it was ever quite enough. And I got thinking about this too, because remember, I was covering Meghan Markle right back at that time, and also I had an interesting lens because my history was in the entertainment industry. And I very much remember speaking to one of Meghan Markle's directors telling me, Dan, even before she met Prince Harry, she was the biggest nightmare of an actress I ever worked with. Demands for first-class flights that didn't exist, Brittany. Some of these routes didn't exist. Like, there are no first-class flights between Europe, like the Europe mainland, and London. And she was demanding first-class flights. And when the travel people said to her, look, there are no first-class flights on these routes. There's a business-class flight. There's no first-class flight. She said, okay, you're going to have to get me a private jet then. This was on a relatively low-budget B movie. But Sarah Vine wasn't done there, because she went on writing, one thing is certain. Meghan is not one to allow herself to be shortchanged. If someone displeases her, they sure know about it. I was once told, this time by a friend with contacts in the royal household, and by the way, a little bit of a connection here, just in case you don't know who Sarah Vine is. She was married to Michael Gove, now the editor of The Spectator, but at the time of Harry and Meghan's time within the royal family, one of the most senior politicians in the land. And Sarah Vine actually walked into a state dinner alongside Rose Cholmondeley, a friend of Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales. So Sarah Vine is not talking out her ass when she talks about contacts in the royal household, if you get what I mean. Anyway, back to what she was told. One day, she says, and this story horrifies me because I am 100% convinced it is true. If you value the whole truth and nothing but the truth on these royal stories, make sure you subscribe to Outspoken right now. It allows me to work outside of the MSM and the Royal Rota. One day, the Duchess was interviewing for staff. A young girl, a perfectly harmless and nervous Sloane in her early 20s, a Sloane, that means a bit of a posho Londoner, was ushered into her presence. Meghan was sitting at her desk, reading some papers. For what seemed like an eternity, she kept her eyes down, ignoring the girl completely. Then she glanced up, examined her, then went back to her work. She uttered 3 words at that point. You can leave. That is that. And you've got to expect that that is the type of behaviour that all of Meghan's staff had to deal with. And what's interesting to me is a lot of people talk about Meghan's bullying of junior staff members, right? The PAs, the people who are coming in for the job interviews. And of course, that is much more appalling because these are young people on young salaries who are trying to get ahead in life. You know, the royal family does not pay a lot of money, but it is a good place to learn. It's a great place for connections. And there are, of course, perks to the job, and you're part of history. But it wasn't just the junior staff that Meghan would treat like that. It was also very senior staff members. And some of these people who Meghan was bullying to the point of tears and total dissolution with their life were highly experienced, very tough people. So the fact that she would treat juniors like that, just a woman in for a job interview, is completely nuts. But this was something that I guess was just so commonplace to her. Sarah Vine goes on. One for Harry to ponder, perhaps, as he considers his future within the royal family. Now, Tom Sykes of The Royalist has done some of his own reporting based on Sarah Vine's piece, going to both the Sussexes and Sarah Vine. I want to take you through what he has revealed on his Royalist Substack. He writes, when I went to Meghan's side for reaction, there was no on-the-record comment. But their side have made it pretty clear they regard articles like this as hateful, and that word was in quotation, hateful. So clearly they are just dismissing this as hateful rhetoric from Sarah Vine rather than actually dealing with the truth about, well, did this happen? You know, which is surely the most important thing. Is it true? And so Tom Sykes says he messaged Sarah Vine and he asked her, why write about them at all? And Sarah replied, because she and they are culturally significant, because the last 10 years have reshaped the royal family, because they have put themselves at the center of the conversation through their actions. And then specifically when he challenged her on this Sussex concept of her reporting being hateful, Sarah Vine replied, the idea that no one is allowed to make any kind of considered assessment of their behavior is in itself incredibly arrogant. People are judged by their actions. And by the way, there is no hate in that piece. And I've read the full piece. I actually agree with Sarah Vine on this. It was a very, very moderate piece. And she says, I've actually had many emails today saying I've been far too soft. I've just tried to be fair, to assess the situation based on the facts and their own actions. You cannot deny reality. They did what they did. But what I've tried to do is put them in a wider cultural context. And Tom Sykes then reminds us of his own reporting for the Daily Beast in 2024, which had former staff calling Meghan a demon with psycho moments. A florist screamed at down the phone for half an hour over a bouquet. And of course, the paper trail, her own press secretary, Jason Knauf's 2018 email saying she had bullied 2 PAs out of the royal household. Sykes says the bigger point is that after Harry's court defeat, the Sussexes can't sue the Mail, the palace won't defend them, and Hollywood doesn't need them. Which, Brittany, is quite a damning indictment, right, of where they find themselves 10 years after entering the public domain.
It really is, Dan. I think Tom Sykes' assessment there is flawless, especially when it comes to Hollywood. Hollywood doesn't need Harry and Meghan. They got their pound of flesh from them. They're done. The palace won't defend them. And they don't really have a shield anymore because, calling comments hateful or racist is no longer working because people see through this. You can't have such a long track record as Meghan does of bullying allegations without everybody believing that there has to be some truth to them, regardless of what Harry and Meghan and their team are saying here. And so I think Harry and Meghan very much find themselves on their own isolated little island, but they did it to themselves. They did not treat people well. They did not treat the palace well. They did not treat staff well. They didn't treat their own families well. And you shouldn't be surprised if after a while you have no more defenders. And that's the case for Harry and Meghan. Basically, they have themselves and the Sussex squad, and that's about it at this point. Netflix doesn't have a strong investment in them, and so Netflix is fully willing to throw them to the wolves, as we saw with Variety earlier this year, I believe it was, and then we've had the piece in the Hollywood Reporter. So basically, the glasses are gone. We can all see Harry and Meghan for who they are. Harry and Meghan, though, just can't seem to accept that. That's why Meghan constantly lies. She constantly exaggerates. She constantly is trying to craft a narrative because she desperately doesn't want us to see the real her, even though we've all seen through her in some cases this entire time. She's not fooling anyone except for the gullible. And so she needs to give up this holier than thou act. It doesn't work at all. I think it makes her, to the public, look even worse. But she can't help herself because she has this incessant need for control and to look perfect and gracious and all these things. And so all of this stuff battles, and you just end up with an absolute mess and toxicity and chaos, which has not served Harry and Meghan very well, especially in the last year or two.